Thank you everyone for joining us today. We will be sharing today our insights report about the Asia Pacific digital health ecosystem. As opposed to just sharing the presentation, it will be narrated by both Anna, our innovation lead for Galen Growth, sitting in Singapore, together joined by me. I'm the Chief Research Officer of Galen Growth, and I'm also located in Singapore. You may have seen our latest presentation that we've been sharing last week, where we have shared our insights research about the United States digital health ecosystem. And in the upcoming weeks, we will be also hosting a webinar both about the European digital health ecosystem as well as the Middle Eastern digital health ecosystem. So if you have not seen these events yet, you can go back over to our website. We are having those events shared there. I'm looking forward to having you join these events as well. As shared today, we are focusing on the Asia Pacific ecosystem. If you have not downloaded our report yet, it's also available on our website on galengrowth.com/reports/research, and you will find all the other reports. As usual, we are making them available complimentary, so that you can kickstart your 2021 strategy within your organization, or if you're an investor, to feed into your pipeline and to always stay up to date with the latest and greatest from the digital health space. Just a few minutes about ourselves before I give over the mic to Anna. Galen Growth, for those who are joining us for the very first time today, we are the leading digital health ecosystem advisory firm to most of the large pharma insurance players, medical device companies, as well as CVCs and VCs in the space. We are having 3 offices throughout the world at the moment, with headquarters in Singapore and 2 sister offices, both in Basel, Switzerland. This is where Julian, whose voice you heard a few minutes ago, is sitting, and we're building our team there, as well as in Tokyo, from where we're leading the engagement with our Japanese clients. The way how we are engaging primarily with our clients is around 4 different solutions. Above all sits HealthTech Alpha, which is our digital health analytics platform, where we are gathering all the information out of which we are drawing our insights reports to you, as well as when we are doing bespoke and advisory work for our clients. The information is the richest database that you can find around the digital health space, currently having about 80 million data points that we are constantly curating and updating. Just to go back here, and you see our current expansion, we are tracking more than 7,300 digital health ventures. We are not tracking medical devices. We're not tracking biotech within the platform. So those are purely digital health players. We are tracking the activity of the investors in that space. Those are at the moment 6,700 and counting, and we are tracking more than 9,500 individual partnerships between collaboration, between corporations and startups, as well as institutions and startups. From HealthTech Alpha, then, we are building our other 3 solutions, particularly now the acceleration program that we're running for the large corporations, where we really guide you through full-fledged or fully etched enterprise solution, where we are building cohorts around your value propositions, and we are helping you to find the right venture for your pipeline, and therefore helping you to form pilots with startups that fit into your pipeline. We also do next generation scouting work, where we are working across your value propositions, and we are helping you find the right solution or the right solution partner for your company, as well as we are providing lots of research, such as the reports that we are sharing today. Today we are focusing on the investment trends. We're going to deep dive a bit into a category focus as well as a therapeutic focus before we are providing a bit of deep dive. Before we are then giving you a bit of our outlook for 2021 and what are we predicting will happen to the digital health ecosystem in Asia Pacific during the current year, and we are hoping to see that this is further expanding as it has been over the past years. So with this quick intro, I would like to give over to Anna, who will lead you through the first slides of the presentation before giving back to me at a later stage of the presentation again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dario, and welcome everyone to today's webinar, where we will be having a look at what happened in digital health across the APAC region. As we have been broadcasting in our channel, 2020 indeed proved to be a turning point for digital health, accelerated even more by, of course, the global pandemic. The ongoing crisis has fueled an increased trust on digital health solutions, both from investors and patients. While today we will not be exploring furthermore the evolving patient's behavior, we will be focusing on describing the money flow. So Dario, let's move on to the next slide and let's jump directly to the numbers. So digital health in APAC closed at $6.14 billion US dollars, experiencing thus a 25% increase compared to last year. With this, the APAC region became the second highest funded geographical area, with, of course, the US leading the global race. By focusing on Europe and the Middle East, both the regions lagged behind in this game by actually taking some steps back, with the Middle East decreasing compared to last year 17%, and Europe minus 45%. This actually established a change, of course, compared to what we noticed in 2019 for Middle East and Europe, where Middle East experienced a slight increase of 1% compared to 2019, and Europe, on the other hand, recorded a jump of plus 169%. Let's go back to the APAC region, which is today's focus. Next slide, please. Fantastic. Okay. Also, internally in the region, we noticed different patterns, huge differences in the distribution of funding, but also in the pattern of the transactions. Indeed, as expected, of course, China leads the venture funding in APAC with $4.9 billion, alone representing 80% of the total funding deployed across the region. As you notice, the smaller geographical areas stop at millions range. Let's continue focusing a second more on China. The deal scene was characterized by several mega rounds, and in this case, it is worth mentioning the Series B funding of JD Health and We Doctors Series E1 funding, which alone accumulated $1.2 billion. Moving ahead, following second in terms of number of deals, we find Japan and South Korea, which totaled 96 deals closed during 2020, with a much smaller average ticket size equal to, as you notice, 5.5, which represent almost a tenth of the average deal size we notice in the Chinese case. Let's move to the Indian subcontinent. It follows second in terms of total venture funding, with less number of deals closed compared to Japan and South Korea, but with a higher average deal size. Indeed, it is worth noticing that both China and India, in terms of common factors between two countries, we can say we notice the presence of more established ventures, which managed during 2020 to attract the most significant funding, thus tapping also into the investors' risk-averse attitude, who in this case prefer placing their bets on only a restricted number of ventures. So overall, from a deals number perspective, the region went through a decrease of 25% compared to 2019, again indicating a kind of trust from investors on established ventures and a preference towards a known fragmented portfolio for lower risk. Now, let's move to our analysis on a quarter-on-quarter basis. Dario, next slide, please. Thanks. We will shadow for a moment on the past years, and we will be focusing on the past 2 years, so 2019 and 2020. As you noticed, 2019 started powerfully, but went through a significant arrest as the US-China trade was harshening at the second half of the year. Indeed, the year registered two of the lowest quarters, the third and the fourth in this case, impacted further on by the Indian general elections, which put investors on their toes and on hold. The trend, this decreasing trend, continued also in the beginning of 2020, as COVID-19, of course, started spreading around the world, and understanding of its impact and evolution were still building up. As a direct consequence to this trend, we noticed indeed a steep rise in the last 2 months of 2020, as of course digital health had the opportunity to unveil its potential, both as a pandemic response, but also as a lasting alternative to traditional healthcare. Now, I would pass over to Dario with its deep dive on the therapeutic and disease area. Thank you so much, and I welcome all the questions. Thanks.
Thanks. Yes, indeed. If you have any questions, you can always use the chat function. I see that this is fairly active already. I will pass this over to Anna for the moment in case anything can be answered in written. Otherwise, always feel free to use the Q&A function. See in the middle of your screen, we will try to address your questions after. I will focus now a bit more on both the categories as well as the therapeutic focus areas that have been seen an increase in funding over the past year in Asia Pacific. When we are looking into the categories overall, we're basically seeing that 5 categories. So the majority of funding being raised throughout 2020, covering about 73% of the total assets of the total funding that has been deployed. Above and beyond all is medical diagnostics. They've been raising $1.2 billion in total. Things in medical diagnostics are, for instance, genomics-related applications, as well as medical imaging solutions that are helping you to for instance, interpret your radiology images much more effectively. Online marketplaces, similar to the previous years, have seen strong funding. However, here, worth noticing is the pre-IPO deal that JD Health raised back in February of last year with $830 million. Taking this one out, and you would then basically see that the online marketplaces are basically lost a huge amount of share over the past year, which is quite significant in terms of funding. Health management solutions also continue to increase in terms of both volume and of value. We've seen close to $900 million invested. MedBanks, which is an oncology player, a very large oncology venture based in China, has raised here the largest amount of funding with more than $300 million invested. Population health management solutions. So here in this category, you would also see players like WeDoctor and Ping An Good Doctor, for instance, working in, raised $885 million overall. DXY is $500 million. Just at the end of the year, on the 28th of December, was here the largest deal that we've seen, as well as very much expanding last year, considering that we've seen lots of insurance players struggling over the pandemic crisis. Health insurtech solutions. So this is not insurtech overall. Insurtech overall has probably raised significantly much more funding, but here we are really talking about solutions that are improving the health insurance side of it. With Shuidi, which is again a Chinese player, a very large also payment gateway for the insurance business, raising the largest amount of funding, $200 million invested. So overall, the remaining categories raised a total of 27% out of the $6.14 billion invested. When we are taking the Galen growth taxonomy, those are basically 12 other categories that are only representing 27% of the entire funding that has been invested over the past year. When we look a bit more into the therapeutic focus areas, and I'm gonna narrate this one a bit more over before I give you a bit of a more deep dive overview about both the categories and the therapeutic focus areas. When we are tracking the activity of ventures in a particular therapeutic focus area, we've seen over the past years that those solutions that are focusing on oncology are continuously increasing and continuously raising the most significant amount of funding. And we've seen that over the past 5 years, oncology has always been at the top position of ventures raising funding. With this year $1.6 billion invested. This has been an increase of roughly 50% more compared to last year, slightly less. However, it has been very significant in an increase after we've seen a decrease in 2019 compared to 2018. Cardiovascular diseases also saw a slight increase here of about 30% year on year. With close to $400 million invested. Again, here we also saw last year a decrease as compared to 2018. When we compare this to 2018 overall, we still see that we are still lagging behind roughly 50% as compared to 2018. So there's still lots of space for ventures in the cardiovascular space to increase more to raise more funds. The diabetes side, and we deliberately always take this out from the cardiometabolic space. However, when we're looking into cardiometabolic diseases overall or into the chronic diseases overall, there are many more disease focus areas. But considering diabetes is such a significant space, we always try to encapsulate it a bit from the overall category, has this year raised $230 million about, which again increased as compared to last year, but again was significantly lower as compared to 2018. Very interesting here, the infectious diseases, considering that we have been in a pandemic year. We've also seen that there has been this major push towards ventures that are solving the infectious disease space. We've seen an increase of more than 2.5x as compared to last year, with more than $180 million invested. And we are expecting this to increase also during the course of 2021 even further, considering now also governments are more looking into what is the long-term vision to fight also future pandemic crisis that may arise, considering that they are all expecting that the COVID crisis may repeat, or even the current pandemic crisis could continue even a bit longer. Last but not least are mental health solutions. Again, a very often spoken therapeutic focus area over the past year, raising $82 million in Asia Pacific. If you compare this to the US, and you may have heard this last year, significantly lower. The difficulties we're seeing in Asia Pacific is particularly the adoption rates. Therefore, for a mental health venture, raising funds still struggle, considering that they don't have the critical mass people already on their platforms, as well as the ventures that are focusing on mental health are still much younger as compared to their counterparts based in the United States, where this year we've really seen funding exploding in the mental health space. So just to give you a bit of the deep dives of what we're going to focus today, when we look into the mental health overall, so those are all the deep dives that we are providing within our report. I have deliberately only chosen one example each, just to give you a bit of a flavor about how do you best read the graphics that we are presenting to you, and to help you understand the richness of what we can provide, as well as the information that may be interesting to you also for your own strategy internally. So looking into the mental health space, as I was just sharing, the ecosystem is still significantly younger as compared to the counterparts in other parts of the world. This year we've seen 17 deals being closed in mental health. These have been accounting for $82 billion. If we compare this to last year, we've seen 20 deals, $68 million. However, interesting here is we're seeing that the funding is increasing while the funding volume is decreasing, which shows you that the ventures that are active in that space, slowly but steady, now also maturing. When we look into which value propositions are they covering, and here we're really looking into the digital patient journey from the preventive side all the way over to the adherence side, is that we are seeing a major decrease across the early stages of it. So raising awareness for mental issues, or even on the prevention side, again, on a very early phase. However, we've seen a major increase of 20 percentage points up, and now representing 42% of all deals that have been allocated during 2020, now representing those 42%. So almost 50% of all ventures that have been raising funding in the mental health space this year are focused more onto the late stage of the patient journey, and therefore how do you better cope with your disease, and how do you also engage with your physician after you have been diagnosed already with a mental problem, and therefore move into long-term care. This again also comes together with those mental health solutions that are more telemedicine or teleconsultation based. Considering that we can't, or that it was difficult to see a physician during the COVID-19 crisis, now basically being able to see them online and talking about their mental issues, etc., really brought the attention to those sort of solutions during the course of 2020. Interesting ventures to look into here. We're just showing 3 here. Simple Psychology, which is a Chinese venture, already a bit later as compared to their counterparts in Southeast Asia, at a Series C. We currently value it very objectively within the digital health platform Health Tech Alpha at roughly $180 million. The latest funding round this year was at $30.5 million. And they're basically providing a network platform that helps a patient find a suitable psychological counselor and therefore engage with them online. So it's kind of on the medical concierge side, combined with a teleconsultation platform, as well as a huge network of physicians that are based on their platform. A second platform, home here in Singapore, recently expanded also to Switzerland. In case you've seen the news about 2 days ago, is Somusk, a disease management platform that is looking into the RWE space, so real world evidence. They're not only focused on mental health, they're also looking into other cardiometabolic diseases, starting off as a diabetes platform, and now very much focused on providing real world insights into the mental health space as well. They have closed also last year a strategic collaboration with AIA for their cardiovascular program, for their diabetes program. And there have been recently also been news shared that they are now working around their mental health solution with a couple of key strategic players in Southeast Asia. Last platform that I'm sharing here is Haoxing Ting, again, a teleconsultation platform, probably the platform with the largest network of physicians based in China. They're also providing offline counseling services now. They've acquired a couple of offline spaces, but they are now basically also can provide offline consultation services for their patients. For the category of what we are deep diving on today a bit is around the medical diagnostic space. As I was sharing earlier, we really look here into solutions that are, for instance, supporting the analysis or the diagnosis of certain diseases using medical images. These can be various different medical images, and therefore having the right machine learning or AI tools in the back that help you diagnose a disease just from images, much more powerful, and therefore support physicians is a very interesting tool to use. Here we've seen a major increase also in terms of deals that we've seen in 2019 versus 2020, up by 17 deals year on year, very significant number. We've not only seen a major increase in terms of funding volume, but also funding value, now worth $1.14 billion invested overall, very significant step up. However, we've seen some of the major deals here in December. Up and beyond was the 3D medicine deal, which was the very first Series H deal for digital health in Asia Pacific. Again, here we've seen that those platforms start diversifying. They're not only now providing diagnostic solutions, but they're also taking on other solutions that they are complementing their own platform with that are more towards the treatment cycle. So one step before when you take the digital patient journey, again, as an example. Looking here again into some of the spotlight ventures here, again, a Chinese venture with 3D medicine. As I was just sharing, the latest stage was a Series H, the very first one in digital health in Asia Pacific, now currently valued at close to $2 billion, very mature when we are taking to the maturity of how we are calculating it within the platform, a very objective like-for-like comparison of ventures. MedGenome, an Indian venture that is focused on genomics-related diagnosis, also raised a Series D deal, and therefore already also from a valuation point significantly higher compared to some of the counterparts. And the last one, a bit younger, only Series B here, is also a genomics-related diagnostics platform called Vision Medicals. They've raised 30 million last year, and you see also the significant difference in their maturity. This is also the amount of partnerships they're forming, for instance, in that space as well. Interestingly, however, if you compare this to what I was just sharing about the mental health platforms, medical diagnostics ventures have been already on the radar for significantly longer in time. So the stages of where they're in, and therefore the funding that they're raising, significantly higher as compared to mental health solutions. And therefore you see the sort of discrepancy when you're now looking into other mental health ecosystems, for instance, where you see already much larger funding rounds being closed, for instance. So just to summarize what you were just hearing before I move into what we expect to come out of 2021 for us. We've seen $6.14 billion invested, more than 300 deals, significantly lower in the terms of volume last year, but significantly higher in terms of value invested as compared to the previous year. Again, similar to the previous years, China has been above and beyond all the other ecosystems. This is significantly driven, considering that we've seen that the Chinese ecosystem has been opening themselves again during the second half of the year. Regional, or not regional, but national, the national ecosystem has been reactivated after April, with travels being enabled, and therefore we've seen a larger amount of funding being distributed to Chinese ventures during the second half of the year. You may have seen on the slide before that we saw a major decrease in funding during Q1 and Q2. And then once the Chinese government has opened again themselves up internally, we've seen that Q3 and Q4 have really been the largest quarters that we've experienced so far, also in Asia Pacific. And comparing them year on year, every quarter, or the quarter average funding that has been distributed in 2020 has also exceeded 2019 overall. What we've also seen is that Northeast Asia, which is always a very interesting ecosystem for most of the clients that we are working with, has seen significantly more funding deals being closed, but at a much smaller average deal size. This is significantly driven by the fact that the ventures there are still very young. So we are looking into early to Series A stage ventures. These are now slowly but steadily moving into later stages. We've therefore now seen that there are more ventures picking up funding, and we're expecting that over the next couple of years, we are seeing that the funding that will also expand in terms of value being invested. Southeast Asia has been a bit behind. We've seen one major deal, which was the Bioformis deal, which is now often also measured as a US venture, even though they are born and raised in Singapore, and therefore we are still counting it into Southeast Asia overall anyways. Have been really pushing the funding in Southeast Asia, and therefore we have exceeded last year. However, Bioformis $100 million deal had a very significant share in the total funding that has been invested. We've also seen that we had a significant increase of funding in medical diagnostics. We've seen an increased demand for mental health solutions, not yet in terms of funding invested, but in terms of adoption. Most of the work that we're currently doing is also around the mental health space. People are trying to really understand how can we bridge the gap between the physician and the patient much more significantly, and therefore we are expecting this to also increase next year, or this year. So what are we now expecting as Galen growth, considering that we are always talking to all the innovators, both from the startup side as well as from the corporate and from the investor side? So we've seen this strong momentum in 2020, and we really expect that this momentum will be carried over to 2021 as well. We've seen a significant amount of funding increase compared from 18 to 19 and then 19 to 20. So we're expecting that this will also exceed much more significantly also during 2021. Just as a point, we've already seen more than $770 million being invested in the first month of this year in Asia Pacific alone. If you extrapolate this, you would end up at somewhere at $9 billion. There will always be a dent in terms of months. So we are probably expecting to see the funding to close somewhere around $7 billion during 2021. However, this has then already been strongly exceeding what we've seen during 2020. We are also expecting more and larger digital health exits. Exits here are both IPOs and M&As. Considering that the pandemic crisis has a push, both positively and negatively, we're expecting that we will see more reconciliation of businesses. Ventures may decide to sell their business to some of their competitors, or even corporates are becoming more interested in acquiring a venture out of what they're doing, things that we are currently not so often seeing here in Asia Pacific, so that really a corporate takes a significant strategic stake within a platform. As well as from the exit point of view, we've seen last year has been an extremely strong year for IPOs, not only in the US, from where you hear much more often things, but also in Asia Pacific. And here we are talking particularly about the Kosdaq in Korea, as well as the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. We're expecting that this will also expand this year. There are already a couple of ventures in the pipeline that have been announced that they will go public this year. So we're expecting those deals to also increase, also driven by some of the large exits that we've seen last year. From a patient point of view, we are expecting that outpatient management solutions, so healthcare at home, will just go beyond also the standard teleconsultation. You're calling up your doctor, to go more towards how do you better manage your disease overall? How do you better bridge the gap between your physician and your patient by going beyond just these pure teleconsultation, tele-rehab solutions? So how do you build a proper, stable value chain that actually makes the outpatient management much more effective? Again, something that we are expecting to happen in 2021. What we are also expecting to see is a more diversifying portfolio of some of the digital health players within particular categories. Here we're talking about particularly disease agnostic platforms, form so-called VIMPROs, so vertical integrated micro providers. So you're not only solving one particular value chain model, you're actually trying to solve two or three of those. Take, for instance, the example of you are a medical concierge platform and you would like to also integrate your teleconsultation platform, things that we also see already, but then you're also onboarding, for instance, a prescription delivery platform. So how do you address multiple stakeholders within your value chain and therefore can diversify yourself much more and don't rely on only one particular solution, especially when things like teleconsultation become more now as a technology and no longer as a standalone solution as what we've seen in the previous years. Next, what we also expecting is that mental health solutions will continue to see high importance during especially the first half of 2021. We are probably all aware that COVID-19 is not fully over, and we're not expecting this to happen in the next 2 to 3 months, I believe. Is that the pressure on the mental health of people will continue to stay high, especially when you look into those countries where the lockdown is continuing. So we are believing that mental health solutions continue to play a high importance for most of the stakeholders from the patient side, from an HCP side. So how do you better cope with mental issues? During the second half, no one can foresee how long COVID-19 will last. So therefore, we don't want to make a proper projection what will happen during the second half. Will there be a restructuring again of also funds, how they're allocating their investments? Will we continue to see a push towards mental health solutions? It's hard to say at the moment, considering we still don't have data around this. The sixth one is around digital therapeutics. We've seen last year, and we shared in our report, that there have been 14 digital therapeutics receiving FDA approvals. There have been a couple of other approvals in the NMPA as well as in the JFDA, so both the Chinese and the Japanese as well. And we're expecting that we will see a much higher adoption rate than this year. Physicians maybe start prescribing these. However, this always relies on the governments to also support the prescription of digital therapeutics. We already saw Germany of now starting with prescription therapeutics to be prescribed, whether the payment that they are currently foreseeing for those solutions is the right or not the future will tell, but we're expecting for Asia Pacific that digital therapeutics will also have a much higher adoption rate. And here we're talking really about replacement therapies or so-called digital buddies that are literally just helping you also to bridge again the gap to your physician. Lastly, on this point, also a bit provocative, is the side that we are expecting a reevaluation of how corporates at the moment are valuing their existing partnerships, as well as the investments and innovation models that those corporates are having at the moment and their respective CBCs. So how will 2021 shape their overall strategy? Do you want to continue engaging internally and trying to innovate yourself and find a partner? Or are you actually being open to the point that, okay, you can't ship alone. You will need someone who can steer your ship much better than yourself, and therefore you're looking more into outside parties as well who help you either build partnerships that you have already close to a much stronger one, or actually find the right partner within that space. So we are expecting this reevaluation of how partnerships are currently being closed to probably change during 2021, and therefore probably see also different structures of partnerships arising in 2021. It may not be a one-to-one partnership, but maybe a three-party partnership that could also be formed out of this. So with this, I've seen that there are a couple of questions. I will open the floor. I will also invite Anna to join me again via audio, and we're happy to answer your questions. So feel free to simply put them in the Q&A. Many thanks. So I already have 3 questions open here. Do you see a category difference between APAC and the US? A nice question from Jean-François. I believe you are here referring to what value propositions the ventures are solving. Yes, there's a difference a bit in what sort of value propositions of the digital patient journey are being addressed. The US is more patient-centric, and we're looking more into therapeutic-focused ventures that are having a solution to target one particular value chain as well as one particular therapeutic focus area. In Asia Pacific, considering that we are having so many different ecosystems out there, you have a very regional difference. When you're looking into developing countries, take Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, for instance, you are more towards the awareness side. So you're looking into medical education platforms, you're looking into health service searches such as medical concierge services, or even just booking platforms. How do you find the best doctor out there? Versus when you look into more established ecosystems, so you look, for instance, into China or Japan, or Korea or Singapore, where you're more on the diagnostic side, where the payments or where the price of healthcare is already significantly higher. So we are looking here into solutions that are actually bringing an advantage to lowering the cost of healthcare overall. Hope this answers this question to a certain extent. From Sajjad Kamal, is there any specific changes in medical visualization, especially after this pandemic breakdown? If you could elaborate a bit further within your question, what are you referring to medical visualization? I'm happy to answer that particular question. Lastly, from Helen Kim, I see here Korea in terms of regulations for digital healthcare is not open yet due to national healthcare insurance really cover affordable public health, and so many clinics are around with low prices. Yes and no. We are seeing that Korea this year has seen a change in the policy, especially when it comes to teleconsultation platforms or telemedicine. They have been opened the market for the very first time. At the moment, this is only temporarily of how they have been opening this. It doesn't necessarily mean exactly as how you're saying that this will stay, but at the moment we're seeing that there is this a bit of a regulation change in Korea happening, and they may decide to leave it after this, considering that you do now have Korean ventures that are really focusing on this one as well. But if this is going to stay, only time will tell. Let me say answering. Do you think it is possible to find collaboration or business model in Southeast Asia? Not quite sure about the question that I see there. Let me see if within the chat anyone has submitted any questions. Excellent. So, Christian Jian, what are your views on telehealth market in Indonesia with AlloDoctor, HaloDoc, and Grep Health? It's a very interesting question. When you look into Indonesia, it is an overall ecosystem that is in theory very juvenile. However, you do have large players with HaloDoc, with AlloDoctor, and with Grep Health out there. It is a very it's basically a market to a certain extent only between these three when it comes to the more established players. However, we are seeing that there are many smaller players now establishing themselves as well. They are not so much focused on the broad mass of people. So they are not so much focused on disease agnostic teleconsultation. They become much more precise. For instance, last year we had a platform within our digital health cohort that we are launching every year that is focusing particularly on the cardiovascular side, and therefore basically integrating disease management around the cardiovascular side with a teleconsultation platform. So again, we will see these formations of more those like those VIM pros. So you will not be only a teleconsultation player anymore, considering that you can't stay noticed out there, considering that you do have those large players, especially in Indonesia with those three that you've just listed there. But we are seeing more specialized solution providers that are taking a particular stake of the value chain, but can do this much more significantly compared to those that are focusing on the overall introduction of physicians to a patient, which is more on the primary care side. So then they are looking into tele-rehab solution for a particular therapeutic focus area. We do see, Helen, that there are Korean digital health ventures that start expanding into Southeast Asia as well. There have not seen any significant partnership that we have seen in the previous years. Ventures from Korea usually stay very Korea focused. I don't think that this will change anytime soon. Most of those ventures are rather looking into the US to expand and not so much into Southeast Asia overall. So, okay, if there are not so many more questions out there, I would like to start finishing off here. So whether you are a pharmaceutical, a medical device player, an insurance player, anyone else who's involved in the digital health ecosystem, always feel free to reach out to any of my colleagues. You could also drop me a message, even though my email address isn't listed there. You've seen my LinkedIn in the beginning. You could also probably guess what my email address is, considering that what you see here. You can always follow us, and you find all of our research and all the other information on our website. So with this, I would like to invite you also to join our next session, which will happen next week around the European digital health ecosystem. So until then, I wish you all a great afternoon, evening, or morning, depending on where you are in the world. Many thanks, everyone.
Thank you again for joining.
Thank you.